Okay. Thank you everyone for joining our winter driving webinar. Just some normal things to start off with. I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and that all the slides will be provided to you later in the week when I send out a follow-up email. You are all on mute and will stay on mute for the duration of this webinar, but please write all of your questions in the chat and we will get to them at different points throughout the presentation. Okay. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to tell you a little bit more about myself and the organization that I work for. So my name is Devin DeLibro. I am the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator here at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. If you need to reach me, my email is right there. So Green Energy Consumers Alliance is a nonprofit based in both Boston and Providence, Rhode Island. And our mission is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. And we do this through a myriad of different ways, whether that be our policy and advocacy team or through our more programmatic work like Drive Green, which we're here to talk a little bit about today with electric vehicles and winter driving. So what can you expect from today's webinar? Well, the presentation will be in the first half of the webinar, so I'll just go over, things to know about winter driving, and it'll be followed by a Q&A session with our EV owners who have agreed to be panelists. At that time, the EV owners will put on their mics and their cameras, and we'll discuss all the questions that you've put in the chat. The presentation itself will talk about low temperatures and how they affect electric vehicles, and also the impacts of snow and ice on electric vehicles. But you may be asking, why did we choose to actually talk about winter driving and electric vehicles? Well, we've had lots of people reach out to us concerned about electric vehicles and the effects of low temperatures and winter driving on their vehicles. In fact, when we've surveyed folks who got cars through our program, winter driving was listed as one of the top things that they wished they had known more about before they got their car. But as an aside, 100% of these respondents still said that they would recommend their EV to a friend or neighbor. So fear not, winter driving is not a reason to not go electric. So low temperatures, that's where we'll start today. So why does range decrease in winter? Cold temperatures lessen the range of both ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles and electric vehicles. Gas-powered cars and EVs both lose range in winter, and that's just a fact. On a good day, gas-powered cars have 20% efficiency, so just imagine what that means for winter, and not to mention your wallet. In both EVs and gas-powered cars, energy is used to heat the cabin, defog windows, heat seats, heat steering wheels, etc., all of which decrease the efficiency of the vehicle and therefore reduce how far you can go on a full tank or charge. And so the chemical and physical reactions in the battery occur more slowly in cold temperatures, so it might actually take a little bit more time to charge your electric vehicle. And energy must be put into warming the battery itself and the cabin features, and so that is a little bit of an energy suck and will then affect your range. And then an increased electrical load means that a less range is possible for the vehicle at that time. And how much range will I lose? So I will tell you right now, we like the Norwegians here at Green Energy Consumers, and I'll be referencing them a couple different times throughout the presentation. So the Norwegian Automobile Federation did a test of the most popular EVs in Norway in January of 2020. They found that EVs lose an average of about 20% of their stated range at temperatures near 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. As a caveat, so just know that this study did not include preheating the battery, and it also did not include using the HVAC system or things like heating the cabin of the vehicle during the study. But if you want to learn a little bit more about it, I suggest that you check out the link that I've included on the slide when I pass around the slide deck later on this week. When you see an EV listed, it's likely to have an EP estimated range shown, and that's what we show for the range on our Drive Green website. The EPA estimated range is achievable most of the year, but on cold days, we can expect less than any car's rating. So for a vehicle with 250 miles of range, normally you might get, 50 miles of range normally, you might get 195 to 222 miles on a very cold day. But of course, that depends. Loss of range depends on a variety of factors. Those include how cold it is, how many trips you're taking, where you park, conditions on the road, heating your cabin, and the list goes on. A couple of different places have studied this issue, and I'll talk about that more in the upcoming slides. So AAA is the first study we'll talk about. And in 2019, AAA did a study of 5 cars in 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and 95 degree Fahrenheit weather. And the purpose was to understand the effects of ambient temperature and the resulting HVAC use on EVs. The 75 degree temperature was seemingly used as more of a baseline for temperature. So we're really going to talk about the more extreme temperatures on this slide. So the 20 degrees Fahrenheit and the 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The cars in this study were the 2019 BMW i3, the 2019 Chevy Bolt, the 2018 Nissan Leaf, the 2017 Tesla Model S 75D, and the 2017 VW e-Golf. So it's a wide range of vehicles. AAA compared how range is affected when not using any of the car's HVAC system versus when the HVAC system was in use in both the cold temperatures and the extremely hot temperatures. So you'll see on the graph here, without using the HVAC system, 20 degree Fahrenheit weather resulted in a 12% decrease of range in the vehicle study. That means just the vehicle keeping the battery warm sapped about 12% of range from that vehicle or from these vehicles. When the research added in the HVAC to heat the cabin, they kept the cabin at a temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit, specifically with the maximum fan speed, which is a bigger energy suck than you typically would want to do. So in 20 degrees Fahrenheit weather, that decreased the range by 41% on these vehicles. That's a significant chunk. But we'll talk about more ways to heat your cabin more efficiently so you don't have see as much of a range impact later in the presentation. So while this number seems a little bit scary right now, it really shouldn't be as bad as that. Now in 95 degree weather, the range decreased by 4% with just ambient temperature, and that's I like to think that's barely noticeable. Using the HVAC system in these high temperatures to cool the cabin resulted in a 17% decrease in range. So as you can see, heating drains much more on the battery than cooling. So you're much better, can put your mind at ease more in summer. Now the next study we'll talk about is one done by Consumer Reports. It's more of an experiment. So Consumer Reports did an experiment in 2019, similar to AAA, but this test only compared 2 vehicles and was done in Connecticut when temperatures ranged from 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The study compared a Tesla Model 3 and a Nissan Leaf. You'll see that the EPA estimated range of the Tesla Model 3 is 310 miles, and the Nissan Leaf is 151 miles. So keep that in mind. The study set out to put EVs through 3 roughly 21-mile trips, which resulted in 64 miles traveled. After each of the first 2 legs, the cars were parked outside for an hour, so the cabin temperature would drop, and the cars would have to reheat the cabin for each subsequent leg. So they found that after the 64-mile test, 189 miles were left for the Tesla Model 3 and 10 miles were left for the Nissan Leaf. Typically speaking, if you did 64 miles, that should mean that the Tesla had a remaining range of 246 miles and the Nissan Leaf had a remaining range of 84 miles. So you'll see it is quite different when you're in these cold temperatures and you're constantly starting and stopping your vehicle and completely letting it get cooled down and have to heat back up. So the range used to cover the 64 miles was 121 for the Tesla Model 3 and 141 for the Nissan Leaf. So this further supports our claims that cold temperatures and energy used to heat the cabin reduce the range of an EV. Consumer Reports went so far as to recommend folks buy a vehicle with double your daily commute if you live in colder climates. So if you drive 15 miles to work one way, you want to double that for your total commute of 30 miles a day, which would mean you would want a car with a range of at least 60 miles. What they didn't say in their recommendation is to include your normal like errands that you would do. So I'd also factor those in as well. Okay, like I said, and so those are all the numbers, but how can you actually mitigate these range impacts? I guess we're doing them all at once. Okay, so the first thing you can do is precondition your vehicle. Preconditioning means that heating up your car's battery while it is still plugged in. This way, your battery warms up and operates more efficiently when you start to drive, but you don't have to deplete your car's battery reserves to heat it. You can do this on the go with public charging stations too, and you can consider also charging more frequently while on the go. And maybe also charging, if they have public charging inside, you should do that, or if they have the public charging station in like a sunny spot, make sure you get that sunny spot. So seat warmers and steering wheel warmers. You want to use the special heating features on your vehicle. Most EVs offer seat warmers and heated steering wheels. These require less energy than heating the air will make you feel comfy even if you keep the cabin air temperature slightly lower. So I'm not telling you to not turn on your cabin air. I would personally not be able to handle not doing that, but you can keep it at a lower setting if you use your seat warmers and steering wheel warmers. And no lead foot. So you shouldn't use that crazy torque on your vehicle when you are driving in the winter. You want to drive efficiently. You want to turn on regenerative braking or set your car to eco mode. By capturing any energy that might otherwise be lost, you're extending the range of your car. So don't be a speed demon. Speed increases drag and drag reduces mileage. And then this one is pretty obvious, but clean off your car. If there's snow on your car, make sure you clean off your car and make sure you get the wheel wells too, so there's nothing really like inhibiting your car and there's no extra weight, and your aerodynamics are what they're meant to be by design. Like I alluded to before, park and charge somewhere warm, whether that's in a garage or simply a sunny spot. It'll give you a better chance to have a higher resting temperature and thus allow for it to charge more efficiently. Winter weather is our next section. Okay, I don't know about you, but this was my favorite Super Bowl commercial last year with the Audi and the guy from Game of Thrones. So this was a commercial for the Audi e-tron. So I hope you like it. But snow and ice, and how do those affect electric vehicles? So how do they handle in the snow? EVs are comparable to their ICE counterparts. An additional advantage of EVs is their lower center of gravity. So low center of gravity means that the car handles better and is less likely to roll over than the internal combustion engine counterparts. And you might be saying, like, where does this lower center of gravity come from? Well, it comes from the battery pack, which is located in the floorboards of your EV. And battery packs are quite heavy, so lower center of gravity. And then all-wheel drive options. So I know that all-wheel drive is a must-have for some folks, especially for New England climates. The first EV models on the market did not have many all-wheel drive options, which I could see as an obstacle for some potential EV adopters, but more and more cars are coming out with all-wheel drive options. So just to name a few, Tesla offers all-wheel drive options, the Ford Mach-E, the VW ID4, and so on. So if you're concerned that you don't want to get an EV because it doesn't have all-wheel drive, there are plenty of options out there now that actually do offer that. And lastly, we get a lot of questions about snow tires. And what I like to say is that Whether or not you need the answer is up to you. As a Rhode Islander, I've never felt the need for snow tires, but others in more rural or snow-prone areas might prefer them. What I will tell you is that EV tires require more, just a little bit special things as compared to your internal combustion engine tires. And one of those reasons is because they are heavier. So you need tires that are going to be able to handle more weight and deliver more torque to the road when moving away from a stop. The tread pattern has to be different to handle the near instant torque. And then a foam inlay is needed to quiet the tire noise. So typically you wouldn't hear your tires in an internal combustion engine vehicle. And that's because the engine noise is competing, so it kind of like cancels each other out. But since there's no engine noise in an EV, you need a quieter tire. And just kind of to hammer that point home, we have some really fun videos about EV driving in Norway, and then Ford just put up a new video about the Mach-E and how it handles in winter driving. But just to wrap up this point, I would like to say like if people can do it in Norway, we can do it here too. In 2021, all electric car sales made up 65% of all sales in Norway. Granted, Norway has plenty of monetary incentives in place that help them reach that number, but their temperatures are much colder there than they are here. So if they can do it there, we can do it here. Can you charge outside? The easy answer is yes. If you are looking to install a level 2 EVSE at your home, you want something with a NEMA rating of 3 or 4. Hold on. So NEMA stands for National Electrical Manufacturers Association. The level 3 rating is weather resistant, and the level 4 rating means it will stand up to like falling dirt and rain and sleet and snow. So, you know, they're pretty durable. And the charger should not freeze to your car, so you really don't need to worry about that. And you just need to know that your car might charge a bit slower if it's outside or out of the sun, but it will still charge. And then, oops. So it's just a little summary of my points. So yes, cold temperatures and winter weather do impact your driving, your range as an EV driver. These impacts can be mitigated by the steps that I just went over. And if Norway can do it, we can do it. That's my favorite slogan. Okay, that went quicker than I thought. So we are ready for our EV panelists. So if you are an EV panelist, would you please turn your mic and your cameras on? And just say hi when you're ready.
Hi, Mimi.
Hello,
this is Lisa Martin.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a second. But just so you know, our EV drivers here today are Peter Viner-Brown with his Nissan Leaf Plus, Amy Bart with her Tesla Model 3, Rod Smith with his Tesla Model 3, Peter Haney, I hope I'm saying that right, Peter, with your Chevy Bolt, and Lisa Martin with her Chevy Volt. So let me just stop my sharing. Give me 1 second. And hopefully I can see all of your faces. Can you see each other's faces okay? Like, is it just a screen with all of your faces?
Yep.
Okay. For whatever reason, it's not letting me see that, but that's okay. Okay. So let's dig in. Let's check out all these questions in the chat. So the first question is, do you use high or low regenerative braking on snow or ice? So an example is for Tesla, like standard versus chill setting for regenerative braking.
Well,
personally,
anybody?
I leave mine at high regenerative braking all the time, but I don't really drive on ice all that much. And also in cold weather, the Tesla reduces the regen because it can't charge the battery very much, especially at the beginning of a trip. So it's frequently, de facto at low for me in cold weather.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I do use regenerative braking almost all the time, especially stop and go traffic. But Chevrolet does recommend not using it when you're driving in snow or ice. And I can see why, because it's not using the braking system. You don't have the the anti-lock braking system built in. So it's better to actually use your brakes if you are going to be traveling on slippery conditions.
Just to add to that, I leave mine on all the time. Like Rod said, I have a Tesla. The one thing I do change is the acceleration. In a Tesla, you have different options for your acceleration. So I was always told, if you're in the snow or something, you don't want to have that instant torque if you're on ice. So to turn that down to chill, that's probably the main setting that I would change in the snow or ice.
And just to jump in about the Leaf, I leave it in B, which is the highest regen, and I drove it in the recent storm, and it was, I thought, well, just try it out. It handled quite well. It's very predictable because you've got the weight low down on all these cars. They don't do anything that's really unpredictable. So I found that it's front wheel drive. And leaving it in the highest regen really didn't cause any weird behavior, it didn't cause it to slide or anything. And acceleration wise, traction control sort of jumps in quite quickly on the Leaf. So if you do try and floor it, it won't let you in the snow. So it stops you doing that.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. Okay. My next question is, any updated driving range numbers with newer heater exchangers? So the example is the 2021 Teslas.
Well, I think that the EPA ratings are based on kind of fairly optimal conditions. The EPA ranges, like you're talking about in the presentation, are based on relatively warm weather, and they go down from there. So the fact that you've got the Tesla switched from one heating system to another that's more efficient doesn't really affect that, because the ratings are based on other systems. Although Tesla's ranges have gone up for other reasons, like improvements in batteries, and other manufacturers do the same thing. They improve their batteries every 2, 3, 4 years.
Now I wondered if that's true, that it's really, I wonder if it's more of an average. Like my car I have the new battery. I just had, you all know about the batteries with the Bolt. And they had a huge recall. So I did get a new battery about 3 weeks ago. So now I have a EPA range of 259 miles, up from 238. But even with my old battery, in the summer, I could get 300 miles. In the winter, it might go down to 155, 165. So I always thought that the 238 was an average. If you really have to nurse it in order to get to that 300, 305, 310, I think I've done it at the most. That's around town a lot. But I wonder if it's, if you have 310 on the Tesla, have you gotten more than that actually in the summer?
Yeah, it does go up slightly in the summer, but it goes down more in the winter. For me, that's true for the Tesla. Also, I used to drive a Chevy Volt, the plug-in hybrid, and it was the same thing there. The electric range went up just a little bit in the summer, and it went way down in the winter, or at least in really cold days in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should also know that the EPA doesn't do the testing. It's the manufacturers that do the testing for the EPA. And certain manufacturers like Porsche deliberately are pessimistic about their range. So, and then other manufacturers are optimistic. So Porsche decided they would report lower numbers, and typically you can get a lot more range than the EPA number. But other manufacturers do it the other way. They tend to provide more optimistic numbers. With the Leaf, the Leaf does have battery warmers, but it doesn't have any cooling, so it has a very crude battery management system. It doesn't seem to lose a lot of range in the winter, and it does have a series of gauges that tells you where the power's going and how much you're using for heat, and if you switch off your heat, you'll get so many more miles and stuff like that. But it really doesn't knock the range down very much, I've noticed.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the Leaf has a heat pump, which is more efficient than the inductive systems that some other manufacturers have. And Tesla recently switched to a heat pump.
Yeah, it's an option. You have to specify one of the packages to get a heat pump, and it still has the resistive heaters, so the heat comes on quite quickly, and then it gives the heat pump a chance to get up to speed. So yeah, by the time I back down the driveway, the heat is on. So that's one of the positives about electric vehicles. The heat comes on really fast, which is really nice.
Yes.
Okay. So our next question is, she's very interested to know more about snow tires. I have found our Hyundai Kona with the tires it came with really has no traction in snow and ice. So does anybody have preferences about snow tires? And then a follow-up to that is, does it decrease your range?
Hi, this is Lisa Martin.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I have a Chevy Volt, and I just installed winter tires in it. I bought the Michelin XI Snow. There's minimal range decrease. Really, the largest decrease is going to be from it being winter. Normally, my range in the summer would be like maybe 55 to 60. In the winter, with the winter tires, I'm getting about maybe 35 at most. But it's just a balancing act because I live in Buffalo, New York, and it's very icy and snowy here most of the time in the winter. So I used to drive a truck with all-wheel tires, and it's just a night and day difference. The grip is wonderful, so that I don't really mind the range loss.
I too installed winter tires this year. Last year, having the low rolling resistance tires on my Bolt, and I've had a Leaf and I had a previous Bolt too, and they were just terrible in the winter. It was great in the summer because you can really go over 300 miles, but in the winter, if it was snowy and I live on a hill, sometimes I really have to send it to get it up the hill and then get home. Call my kids and make sure the driveway is clear so I can come shooting up the driveway. So this year I decided to get winter tires, and I definitely noticed a difference in range, some noise as well. They're much softer, but they are very sticky in the winter, which is what you need. And I think my range probably went down maybe 10%, and that's on top of the the usual cold weather reduction. But it's a big difference. I wouldn't have it any other way, because if you need it, I mean, I travel all over New England. I'm on the road all the time. Today's my first day in probably 35 days that I haven't been on the road. Thank you for having this. It gives me a little break. But I think you have to trade off. You trade off safety for for range. And as with anyone with an EV knows, you start the day full every day anyway. So how often are you really going to do 180, 200 miles a day? Except me.
I was going to say, it sounds like you do that quite often.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So one question is, in winter, how long do you precondition the car before you leave?
20 minutes.
20?
That's what it's set for. I turned it on and it turns off after 20, and then I can turn it a second time.
My Model 3 will heat the cabin really quickly. It says like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but it takes longer to heat up the battery if I'm looking to heat up the battery to get regen, and if it needs to charge.
Yeah, the Leaf takes care of battery heating, so you don't have to precondition it, and it never doesn't have regen because they incorporate the friction brakes somehow, so you don't have to worry about your battery being 100%. I had a Ford Focus, and I used to wonder, why isn't the regen working? Well, it's got nowhere to go if you have a full battery, so it doesn't work first thing in the morning. But the Leaf, they figure that out, and they incorporate the friction brakes early on, so it feels just like you're getting normal regen. And I'm retired, so I don't leave at the same time every day, so I don't precondition the battery because you can't. It just takes care of itself. And I don't precondition the cabin because it heats up so quickly anyway that I don't really need to do that.
Okay, so for the plug-in hybrid people on the webinar, can you precondition a plug-in hybrid? And it says, I read that the engine should be off while it's charging, which I think is a good point.
I'm not sure if I'm the only one with a plug-in hybrid as a panelist, but I always have my Chevy Volt plugged in, and yeah, it's okay to precondition it. If I need to precondition it, or if I remember to precondition, I do it like maybe 15-20 minutes ahead of time. But as far as the engine being turned on, the only time it's going to turn on when you're preconditioning is if if the temperature is below like maybe 30 or 15 degrees, depending on what you set it as. And it's just the engine assist, but other than that, it should be okay.
And how do you all do this for your cars? Like, how do you precondition? Do you have garages? Like, what's your setup like?
I park outside, and if I remember, I just pull out my app and I pull it up and tell the Tesla to turn on its heat.
Does anyone else get to use an app?
I have the Tesla too, so I use the app, and 5-10 minutes before I go somewhere, I'll turn the temperature up in the car. I'll turn my heat seater and my steering wheel heater on, just because I'm bougie like that, I guess. It's just nice to have. So I'll turn that on and just go.
Yeah,
I park in the garage.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I said I park in the garage and I just use the app.
Nice.
Yeah, the Leaf app is not very good. It's very, very slow, so it's really not worth using. And if you leave every day, you can set a timer so that if you want to leave at 7, you can just set it up and it'll precondition, warm up the cabin for you. But I don't do that, so I don't need to do that. But I follow reviews of cars that have come to Europe, and the BMW iX, which everybody dislikes the look of, actually has a heated the armrest on the door is heated and the center console. So even your armrests are heated, but you're paying like $80,000 euros, whatever, for this thing. So yeah.
Gonna pay for those.
I park in a garage. Yeah, I park in a garage, sometimes outside my garage too, depending on how many cars we're juggling. But my power cord reaches outside as well. Most of the time it's inside, but if I'm inside, I just use the key because it's faster to just preheat it. If I'm on a job somewhere and I know I'm going to be leaving soon, I'll use the app. Like the Nissan app, the Chevy app is slow as anything. So it might take, after I get it to connect, it might take 3 or 4 minutes before it finally starts the car. But if I do it, 20 minutes ahead of time, 15 minutes ahead of time, at least it's got a head start. And you can do it from anywhere. Like my wife would take my car to work in Providence, and I'm in Warwick, and she would tell me when she's leaving, to go pick up my daughter who's at the daycare at the same school she's at, and I would turn the car on for her. So by the time she got my daughter and then got to the car, which was 15 minutes, the car's already warmed up. Now she drives a Subaru, and my daughter complains about the cold all the time.
That's pretty funny. So for those of you who have like level 2 EVSE installed at your home, did you abide by any like NEMA ratings, or what kind of chargers do you have?
Yeah, mine's like, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, mine's a plug-in to a NEMA plug, and I can't remember which one it is. It's it's a charge point level 2, and the NEMA plug is installed right between the garage doors and the charger on top. And it with the recent blizzard thing, actually, it's not an outdoor charger, but the wind was so strong it blew snow through the cracks in the side of the door, and the charger ended up with a pile of snow on it. And I thought, well, that's the end of that, but it survived. So
Oh,
gingerly blew it off.
Same issue.
I charger, but it seems to work okay with a pile of snow on it.
Yeah, mine is a Clipper Creek something or other, which has a NEMA 4 rating. So that's the highest rating. I actually bought that when I was leasing a Chevy Volt. And I bought something to future-proof it so that I could charge a future EV. And it works fine with my Tesla. I just use the adapter that came with the car. And my recent snow story is that with the latest more freezing rain than anything else, my car got iced over. And the first time ever in owning an EV, since everything's outside for me, the charge port was frozen shut. And I had to go get a hair dryer and sort of, get rid of the ice before the thing would open up, because I really needed to charge at that point. So that's one of the little problems that I've dealt with as an EV. But I've owned the Tesla for about 3 years, and I had the Chevy Volt for 3 years before that. So it's been once in about 6 years now.
I also use a Clipper Creek. I think it's a great product. It doesn't have any bells or whistles. It's not Wi-Fi enabled. Fewer moving parts and controls, so hopefully it won't ever break. And I've had it since 2014 with my Nissan Leaf. I do want to say one thing about parking outside that you were mentioning, Rod. When you have snow on an EV, it's not going to melt like an ice car, a gas-powered car, because the heat from the engine, it melts all the stuff off. It takes a while, so you do have to clean off the hood. And if there's a lot of ice, it's going to stay there. It's going to stay through the duration of your trip unless you bang on it, or you don't want to scrape it. Don't put a nice scraper to your hood. That's one of the things about an EV that's much different with a gas car is how much snow will stay on it because it just doesn't warm up as much.
To add to that, for any car, including an EV, a lot of cars have the side fold mirrors. So if you're parking outside during the winter, I recommend to turn those off because you don't want them frozen in place. Or if they try to automatically come out and there is ice, you can cause damage if it's stuck. I learned that one.
that's a good
Yeah,
point.
on the plus side, Teslas and a lot of new cars have these glass roofs, which let in a lot of light, and that helps heat up the cabin and melt the ice off. But also you can take an ice scraper and scrape across the top of the car like you would a windshield, and you don't have to worry about ruining the paint.
I have a tip for those who have a problem with snow and their charge ports freezing over. They actually sell a cover for your charge port, and there's a lot online, but the one that is popular that I've heard of is called like Eco Solar. It's a magnetized like cover, and it just goes over your charge port, and it will protect your charge port from the elements.
That's a handy tip. Thank you.
And that was one of the things that if you follow any of the YouTubers who live in Norway, They don't like cars that have the charging flap right at the front, just like the Kona, because you get a lot of ice thrown up from the road. And then even if you're out there and you pull into a charging station, you can't get the flap open because there's a huge chunk of ice that's frozen on the front of the car. So they have very strong opinions where the charging flap should be not at the front. So that's something to think about if you drive a lot in slushy weather. Certain cars have the flap right at the front, and that could cause problems.
Yeah, that's on the front bumper as opposed to like the driver's side front just in front of the door, which isn't as much of a problem.
Although I guess on the expensive Taycan, to open, they have flaps on either side just in front of the doors. You're supposed to just slide your finger along the flap and it opens. It's like an electronic. It doesn't work when it rains. So they have issues. So, have these clever cars with these clever ideas, they sometimes don't work too well.
Okay, so we have another question, and it says, for folks like Peter H, driving distance every day, do you drive enough to need to charge? And have you found that it's easy to do in terms of charging infrastructure?
The infrastructure could always be better. I mean, I've been driving a Nissan Leaf back in 2014 and 15, which had an 85-mile range, and I had taken that to Maine multiple times from Rhode Island. Stupid me. 3.5-hour trip would take like 5, 6, 7 hours. It's more of like just to see if I can do it. Now I can get up there no problem. Recently, I've been doing a lot of I have a lot of consulting jobs that are in Connecticut. So I've been to Bridgeport, I've been to Hartford, and everywhere in between. I've been out to the Cape, and I've been to north of Boston. And if I can make it there and back on one charge usually. Bridgeport was a little further, but if I have to stay overnight, the first thing I do is I look on PlugShare and I filter out locations that have hotels that have charging. Because if I can do that, then I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to spend a little bit of time at a public charger. But I haven't had any issues. Yeah, I've come close, and it's mostly because of my planning. I decided, well, I get home this 95-mile trip. I think I'll be home with about 10 miles left of range. That's a little tight. But if you drive conservatively, that's the thing. If you're going to go over 65 miles an hour, or 67, I think is a sweet spot. After that, you really lose a lot of range, and it'll tell you how much range you have left. And you start doing the math in your head, and it's like a game. You want to make, all right, I have 50 miles left, and it says I have 60 miles of range. And so you drive a little bit more conservatively, and now you've made that window a little wider for yourself. Whereas with my Subaru, it gets down to, the light comes on and it says I have 50 miles left and I'm out of gas in 10. So I think an EV is much more accurate on range. And if you plan accordingly, and hopefully things will get better, you shouldn't have any problem. I have never run out of juice since 2014.
So speaking of planning, I've talked about this on multiple other webinars, but can folks just say like what charging apps they use to plan ahead for trips?
A Better Route Planner is one of them, PlugShare. And there's a new one I just found out about the other day called ChargeWay. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that one. I actually haven't. I used it once so far. It was pretty accurate. You put in just like a Better Route Planner, you put in the type of vehicle you have, so it'll tell you, it figures out how big your battery is. You put in the ambient temperature outside and what your average highway speed is going to be, and it'll tell you when you should charge, when it is optimum to charge, because it's better to charge when you're down at like 30% than at 65% battery, because it'll charge faster. What do you guys use?
Yeah, a Better Route Planner is good for long trips, and in relation to today's topics, it lets you plug in information on the temperature. So if you're driving in winter, then it can help you figure out how that's going to affect your range, and how whether you're going to need to stop more often or for longer or whatever. So that's a good one. Plug share is great for around town stuff, or if you just need to find something that's nearby. Since I drive a Tesla, Tesla's got really good in-dash stuff for finding Tesla superchargers specifically. It's less good if you want to find a level 2 charger or like someplace to stay overnight. That would help out.
Yeah, I think looking at what is available in Europe and especially Norway, because they seem to get all the cars there first, pretty much. A lot of the newer cars, electric cars that are coming, come with an app like the Tesla one, especially the expensive ones like Mercedes and BMW, that will tell you, what percentage you will have when you get to your destination. And if you're not going to make it, they'll tell you where you need to charge along the way. And they also preheat the battery, so when you get to the charger, it will charge at a decent speed. That wouldn't work with a Leaf because the batteries are not well managed. So you can get what they call cold gating, which means if your battery is really cold, it won't charge anywhere near the rated kilowatts. So you have to wait for the battery to warm up before it'll charge. And some of these cars supposedly will charge at 200 kilowatts, but if the battery's cold, it will only be, if you're lucky, 50 kilowatts until it warms up. But with a more, I think the ID4 keeps the battery at a constant temperature all the time, so you don't have to worry about that. And if you put your destination in with a Tesla, it will make sure the battery heating starts to occur. And so when you get to the supercharger, it will charge at a decent rate.
We have a similar question, and is there a way that Tesla and other models calculate a range number based on luggage load and weather conditions? So we've talked about weather, but is there anything for like if you have like, some extra weight in your car?
As far as I know, there's nothing to help with that in the Tesla, but a better route planner, one of the options, one of the variables you can set is how much weight you're carrying. So if you're going on a long trip with a lot of weight, you can say, I'm carrying 200 pounds of luggage or whatever, and it should take that into consideration.
Okay.
And the thing about
that'll
weight
work with any car.
is, yeah, and weight isn't actually the biggest issue. It's wind resistance for an EV, or really for any car. As long as the motor should be able to carry 5 people, and that, 5 Americans can be pretty big. But it's wind resistant. So if you have a rack on your car, or, I met a guy from Texas. I met him up in Maine. He had a Model 3 and he was towing his teardrop camper across the country. He was getting around 125 miles of range each time. But he said he had a different camper before that. It was much boxier, and the teardrop actually weighs more, but it's in a better aerodynamic shape. And he was getting under 100 miles with the older one, the boxier one, the lighter boxier one. But now with the teardrop one, which is even heavier, it's more aerodynamic. He's getting around 125 or so, which is still a significant drop, but he's living in it. He's retired and that's his home.
Okay. Another question is, did any of the presenters have issues with charging ports not working in cold weather, meaning electrical glitches?
Other than mine icing over the other day, I've never had any problems with mine.
Yeah, I think
that will happen with any car.
Yeah, a gas flap could freeze shut.
Yeah, the issue that seems to come up a lot online, even in Norway, is that a lot of the public chargers, not all of them are working, and you can't tell in advance whether they're. Although I guess one of the apps does show you, or tries to show you, if the charging stations are not working. So
Plug share, right?
I think
Yeah, PlugShare has
and
it's crowdsourced data, so it's not like up to the minute. If there's a power outage at some location, it's not likely to show it if it's just that day. I think there's a status available from the ChargePoint app, but I'm not positive of that.
Yeah,
And I know
well
Tesla
over it. I mean, I think it's
Tesla shows status on its superchargers in the car's navigation system. That should be accurate.
yeah, I think it's important to get the apps for all of the brands that you're going to use, whether it be ChargePoint or EVgo or Electrify America. They will have the most up to date. So I'll use a Better Route Planner for a long trip. I'll use PlugShare to see if there's any tips that people have put in there. Because people don't always check in on PlugShare when they're there, so you don't know if it's being occupied or not. And then if, let's say, I'm going to roll into town where there's a ChargePoint station, I'll look to see if that's busy or not. There's one near me on Centerville Road. It's free, so now that more and more people have EVs, it is crowded all the time. And I see people there that are just using it right up to 100%. So they're just hogging up those things. And I'll roll in from a long trip and I just need 10 minutes on it, but I can't because it's already 3 people deep waiting. There's a free charging issue right there. I think that it should charge. They should charge money. It will make it so that that convenience is available for more people. I have no problem paying for it. I don't expect to have free electric my vehicle. I don't expect to have free gas for my gas car.
Peter, just a comment on that particular charging station. So I also live in Warwick, and I know that the state put those in and they were trying to pilot and seeing like, whether it was going to be a heavy use area or not. And that's why they were making it free for so long. And I think just like the pandemic happened and they decided to keep it free. I'm not really sure, but it could potentially be something that people charge for at some point. Might be nice.
Right. Well, the very first round of around 75 level 2 chargers from ChargePoint in the state were all the same thing, free for I think it was 2 years, and then the station owners, the people whose property it's on, could then charge if they wanted to. But those 2 on Centerville Road, there's a similar one down off of exit 1 and 95 in Richmond, and there's no one there ever. It's a great place to stop because there's never. And the other thing is with both of those, they're shared. So if someone else is using it, your power is cut in half. You don't charge as fast.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's nobody there, you'll charge much faster.
I have a very specific question for the Tesla owners, and it's, do you have snow tires?
I
Not
don't.
me.
Are they all-wheel drive?
I do have all-wheel drive.
Mine's rear-wheel drive, long range, but I just don't drive enough in snow to make it worthwhile. I can work at home most days, so if it's blizzard outside, I just stay home.
But it turns out that Tesla just implemented a snow mode, and it's if you have an all-wheel drive, because there were complaints that with an all-wheel drive, with an all-wheel drive Tesla, most of the time you're actually rear-wheel drive. The front motor is off to save power, and then if the car if the car starts to slide sideways at the back, the front motor kicks in, and that was a complaint in Norway that can be a bit exciting, in the back roads of Norway. So they just implemented, and I follow this guy, Tesla Bjorn. A lot of people follow him, and he tested it out. And so what happens is that when the car first kicks in the front motor, it keeps it on for a few miles. It doesn't kick it out again for a while until it figures out that the things are stable. So Tesla has put in a snow mode, which they've been asking for a long time. So and a lot of other the newer Mercedes EQA does the same thing. It's mostly rear-wheel drive, and then it will will kick in the front motor as needed. So I think with snow tires, I think, you know, Peter, if you're traveling distance in the winter or you live up in Buffalo, you should probably get winter tires. But for people in Rhode Island, we're sort of like, you know, if we get, you know, 5 really bad snowy days, it's sort of unusual. So to change your tires over every year to winter tires and invest in a set is sort of, could be expensive. But I did hear that there are all season tires and there are what they call all weather tires, and they're different. And I think the all weather tires cope a little better in the winter. And I haven't really looked into them. The tires on the Leaf, as somebody mentioned, they're not exactly grippy in the snow, but because I'm retired, if I don't have to go out. So if it's really bad, I don't go out. So there we go. But there are options.
Well, the thing is that they don't actually call them snow tires. They're called winter tires because it's not just for snow. They're softer and they'll flex a little more in the cold weather too. But yeah, when I had my Leaf, it was probably the second worst tires I've ever had in the winter. Great in the summer. You know, they were grippy enough in the summer and the low rolling resistance, but they were terrible in the winter. Now I have a third driver in my family, my son. So we have 3 cars, and it used to be that on a snowy day, the EV wasn't used as much, but now I need to use it. So the investment was worth it for me. It may not be for everybody, especially if you're working from home or you're retired and you're not going, or you have another car, save it for that. But for me personally, it made a huge difference.
Great. I have one fun comment from the audience, and it says, wind resistance in hills. I frequently drive to and from Worcester from Hudson. I get much better range coming home as it's downhill. I also use cruise control most of the time to avoid pulsing and coasting, and smooth controlled energy management. So it looks like this person is getting a lot of regen when they go back home and go down all those hills.
Nice.
So that's pretty fun. So we have just a couple minutes left. Is there anything that anybody on the panel wants to mention before we wrap up? You know, about winter driving?
I would say as a newer EV owner, I was a little bit scared because you hear oh, well, you're going to lose battery. You're not going to get as much range. One thing I learned from other webinars that we've done is you got to remember that these things happen slowly. It's not that you go from 75 degrees to 10 degrees. It's a slow transition, at least here around where we are. Maybe not in Norway, but and so you adjust as the temperature changes, and then the same thing. And when it goes back up, you adjust back. So it's not something that's very cut and dry, where one day your range is cut in half. You just kind of you learn the feel of it and you get used to it. It's not that scary.
Yeah, one thing that I'd say is that the batteries charge best at certain temperatures, and we've alluded to that before. But one consequence, especially for someone like me who parks outside, is that if the whole car is cold because it's 20 degrees out or whatever, and you plug it in to charge, then a good chunk of the power at first is going to go to heating up that battery. And so if you charge every day, then you're going to be spending a lot of power on your energy budget for the car, just heating that battery. And if you got a car with enough range, you could just plug in every 2 or 3 days rather than every day, and then you waste less power heating the battery. On the other hand, that's not really great for battery longevity because batteries tend to do best with shallow charge discharge cycles. So it's a matter of, pick your poison on that one. I tend to leave it for a few days and then charge up less frequently, but deeper discharges during the winter than during the summer.
Lisa, our sole plug-in hybrid rep, do you have anything to say? Oh, she might have jumped off. Oh, okay.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I just want to thank everybody for inviting me. And yeah, I would say that the winter weather is not really a deterrent. It's not that much of a range loss. You're going to be okay.
Yeah, and actually, as you said, Devon, you know, they live with electric cars in Norway, and their temperatures are, you know, especially in the northern part of the country, are incredibly low, and they've learned to live with electric vehicles. So, you know, if they can do it, we can do it. You know, once the charging infrastructure improves, because they have their charging infrastructure is pretty impressive. So in the southern half of the country, I guess, not so much in the north.
Okay, I think that is a good place to end. So I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists in particular for joining us today and sharing their expertise. Thank you again to everybody who came and listen to and learn today. Just to wrap up, I want to let you know that we at Green Energy Consumers are celebrating our 40th year as an organization. And so if you like us and you like our content, please consider going over to our website and donating to continue, you know, this type of work for us. And then again, thank you. And if you'd like to you know, keep in touch with us. We have our Facebook group. You can follow us on Instagram. We have a newsletter. And if you're not quite ready to get an EV, you can sign our pledge that your next car will be electric. And thanks again to everybody, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
All right.